Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to Hello. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Luisa, and I can see you.
Okay. Because I had some problems with the internet, so I don't know if this is going on. I think we are live anyway. I don't know how to continue this lecture. I'm sorry. I'm having these difficulties now. So sorry, Asim. Hello, can you hear me now? Yes, now we are online. Yes.
I can hear you.
Yes. Sorry for everyone who is attending this keynote lecture. I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties, but here I am with our keynote lecturer, Aseem Inam from Cardiff University. We were supposed to have a proper introduction, but unfortunately my internet went down completely. And so I was just presenting, as usual, the Public Space Academy as a special initiative from City Space Architecture in partnership with the Ove Arup Foundation and with the generous support of UN Habitat. As you know, every month we host a keynote lecture from a scholar, practitioner, artist, or community leader that is working on new ideas, concepts, research outputs, and initiatives that are having a significant impact on public space. This time we have Aseem Inam from Cardiff University. He is a professor and chair in urban design and also the director of the Laboratory for Designing Urban Transformation TRULAB. Aseem is a very well-known scholar across Europe and the US and even beyond. And the reason why he's today giving this lecture is because of his research work on co-designing publics, transformative urbanism, and radical democracy. So the lecture today, as usual, will have our keynote lecturer engaged for around 45 minutes, and then we will have a discussion in the end of about 15 minutes. So if you are listening from wherever you are on LinkedIn or YouTube, if you want to ask questions during the lecture to Professor Inam, you can write in the chat and we will collect questions at the end. So I'm sorry again for these technical difficulties, but now I give you the floor, Aseem, and you can upload your presentation because I've lost your presentation, and then you can share your screen.
Thank you, Louisa. I will share my screen. Can you see that?
It is coming.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Yes, now I see it. Okay, so I leave you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate Dr. Louisa Bravo inviting me. It's a real honor and privilege to be here. The work that she and her team are doing are amazing on public space, so I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. And thank you all for coming and for your patience. You're all prolific for your patience, and thank you for being here. So the cover you see in the background of this title slide is for a book that was recently published called Co-Designing Publics. The book is an edited book with 13 sections and 19 authors and co-authors. The research project was funded by a grant awarded by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council. The goal of this project was to build an international research and practice network. And the purpose of this paperback book is to render accessible to a broad international audience both scholarly research and activist practice. The network consists of scholar practitioners at academic institutions. Since I am the principal investigator, the network is based at my university in the UK, Cardiff University, and we have collaborators at the University of Cambridge, the University of Sheffield, the University of Texas at Austin, the University of Newcastle, and the Indian Institute of Human Settlements. The network also consists of grassroots practices in 6 cities around the world. Asociación Mejorando Vidas in Cali, Cambodian Center for Human Rights in Phnom Penh, Hasiru Dalla in Bengaluru, Project 90 by 2030 in Cape Town, Rujak Center for Urban Studies in Jakarta, and União Nacional por Moradia Popular in Sao Paulo. I will now describe what we did together as a network of collaborators, which is summarized in the book. Premises. The 21st century is truly the urban century by any measure. There exist different ways of understanding and measuring what is the urban, but what they all share in common is the growing and increasingly critical significance of the role of cities in our world. Given the multiple crises cities face, such as the climate crisis, urban inequality, inadequate infrastructure, lack of affordable housing, and of course the COVID-19 global pandemic, this project focuses in which processes of co-designing publics and co-producing the public realm can more effectively help address these crises. When I use the term cities, I mean urbanizing regions, also known as metropolitan areas. As the concepts of ecological footprint, pioneered by William Rees, and planetary urbanization by Neil Brenner demonstrate, we have to consider cities at the regional and even global scales as sets of interconnected networks of flows with consequences beyond their administrative boundaries. In addition, I use what I call categories of convenience. These categories enable us to specify particular type of phenomena, to investigate them within their contexts, and to better understand the relationalities, all the while acknowledging that such categories contain overlaps and fuzzy boundaries. Examples of such categories of convenience that are relevant here are spatial versus non-spatial aspects of cities, the public realm, global south versus the global north. Finally, throughout this presentation, I will share some images, such as this one on the screen now, that are suggestive of possible implications for urban practice from this theoretical discussion, rather than making a one-to-one literal shift from theory to practice. The images are there as visual backgrounds in order to invoke the power of theory to reflect, to wonder about possibilities, and to suggest pathways towards transformative practice. Public realm. Cities are amongst humanity's greatest creations, and the public realm is arguably their most significant aspect. The public realm is what makes a city so rich, so complex, and so full of potential. The starting point for examining the public realm is the fact that the city should belong to everyone, regardless of race, class, or gender. In reality, uneven access to resources and to power influential than others, especially in terms of exercising their rights or actively building democracy. At the same time, it is also the potent site of resistances, contestations, and alternatives to the mainstream status quo. Such alternatives help to illuminate the full potential of the public realm and of a city that can truly be democratic in every sense of the term. There is an argument to be made about a differing private realm versus a public realm. One way of thinking about the private realm is that it is largely the realm of the individual, and the essence of the private is the absence of others. On the other hand, the public realm is largely the realm of the encounter with the other and of the collective. Spatially, being inside one's home is not the same experience as being on the street. Even online, one tends to have more of a public persona on social media. While they are different, the private and public realms do interact and intersect. Make clear the distinction between public space and public realm. What makes the public realm particularly potent is that it is the realm of the other par excellence. The public realm consists of interconnected spatial networks constituted by places, plural, of encounter and of interactions between bodies, cultures, and ideas. Thus, the most significant aspect of the public realm is the fact that it is public. There are two aspects of defining the many meanings of the public that are most relevant here. One is that of relating to the people as a whole that belongs to, affects, or concerns the community or the nation. And the other is that it is open to general observation, view, or knowledge, existing, performed, or carried out without concealment, so that all may see or hear. The public realm is thus arguably the most significant aspect of the city because it speaks to the notion of the city as sets of overlapping and intersecting. Vast potential of them lies in its capacity to act as a catalyst for interactively and collaboratively generating hope by deepening understanding, for building solidarity, for creating dreams, and for pursuing transformative actions. While the public realm is spatially grounded at multiple scales at specific geographic contexts, it is also constantly evolving because the urbanism of a city is constantly in flux. My own investigation into the public realm begins with its spatial manifestations, but by no means do I end it there because it reaches structurally into the dynamics of the spatial political economy of the city and temporally into its production and reproduction over time. Direct engagement with these aspects is what I mean by the spatial production of the public realm. Thus, space as a starting point matters a great deal. For example, public life and in streets and other public spaces is an inexorable part of a vibrant city culture. In addition, rather than being over the buildings, open spaces, and infrastructures of urbanism should allow for flexibility and change. Public spaces such as squares, streets, and parks tend to be defined and bounded spatially and administratively. The public realm speaks more to interconnected spatial networks that contain such public spaces and the flows across spaces that they enable. The best example of this is the sidewalk, which truly embodies the everyday public realm because in most cities it is the most frequented public space by the largest variety of people. The public realm also integrates less obvious and more informal public spaces such as farmers' markets and skateboard parks into a city's network of publicness. I question the standard notion of public space as more or less simply a container for human activity, a notion that continues to pervade conventional design thinking. In fact, the exclusion processes, via their failures to attain recognition in public space, underlines the critical importance of materiality. Although many scholars recognize the democratic character of public space, this idea is also contested, as public space has paradoxically long been a site of exploitation, oppression, and prohibition for women, ethnic minorities, gays and lesbians, the elderly and young, the homeless, and people with disabilities. At the same time, public space remains the most important site where public claims can be made visible and contested. In order to fully understand this critical aspect of public space as part of a larger public realm, we have to view it as part of its spatial political economy. Spatial political economy signifies two key aspects related directly to urbanism. One is a set of power structures and dynamics that exert influence on how, why, by whom, and for whose benefit the city is produced and reproduced over time. Second, within this set of power structures and dynamics are the decision-making processes and outcomes that result in urban priorities and human, financial, and material resources allocation towards urban interventions. Moreover, the concept of spatial political economy acknowledges that the production and reproduction of space do not simply represent aesthetic, technical, or policy interventions of conventional design practices. Rather, they are profoundly ideological and political acts. Some of the vast, untapped potential of design in the context of urbanism can be unleashed by more fully embracing and engaging with the realities of this spatial political economy. Ultimately, one of the most significant design issues for cities is the design of its governance, which extends equally to the public realm. Who designs the public realm over time and by access to which types of resources? Who controls its spaces? What is allowed? What is not allowed? Who benefits from it and why or why not? Here, the question of power examined through political to our understanding of the public realm. Power is not only deeply embedded and expressed spatially, but is exercised on an ongoing basis through control. An especially significant way to examine the uneven distribution and wielding of power has been through the perspective of social justice. Informal urbanisms. A key aspect of my interest in the public realm is a deeper understanding of the often underestimated role played by informal urbanisms. I use the term informal urbanisms broadly to describe a wide range of informal strategies and outcomes in the spatial production and reproduction of the city. Informal urbanisms are not marginalized forms of places and practices. Rather, they are central to understanding the logic of urbanism because they constitute debates about what is legal and illegal in the city, what is legitimate and illegitimate, and with what effects. In fact, the informal and formal are intertwined in existing delineations of coded regulations and mechanisms of finance, such as municipal budgets and bank loans, legalities, such as planning regulations and public policies, and administration, such as institutionalized routines and procedures, which serve as a kind of datum. Thus, informal urbanisms are both procedural strategies and tangible outcomes that are deeply intertwined and should be understood as such, rather than as separate and discrete phenomena. For example, in design terms, spatial outcomes such as buildings, open spaces, and infrastructures emerge out of particular strategies while further reinforcing those strategies. In this context, what I mean by design is a direct and regular engagement with the material city, including and especially with its spatial political economy, without which design would not be possible. For example, developer-led and profit-driven urbanism, in which land and property are system that so dominates the economy and the political structure that enables it both locally and globally. I propose an investigative approach towards informal urbanisms about what we do know, how we know, and what we don't know. Cities are highly complex and constantly changing, so even if we think we know a lot, we need to know more by digging deeper and stretching our understanding of informality. In recent decades, three schools of thought have emerged, with informal urbanisms being positioned within a dualist framework, i.e., marginal economic activities for low-income households that are distinct from modern capitalism, a legalist framework, that is, activity excluded from the modern economy due to adverse bureaucracy, and a structuralist framework, which is subordinated economic units adversely related to formal enterprises within capitalist economy. In addition, poor of different sectors, including middle and high-income urban residents, the state, and business interests. One of the most significant repercussions of such a theoretical and methodological approach towards informal urbanisms is to recognize that citizens are agents of urbanizations, not simply consumers of spaces developed and regulated by others. In much of the global south, for example, people build their houses, neighborhoods, and even districts step by step according to the resources they are able to put together at each moment in the process. Each phase involves a great amount of improvisation and bricolage, complex strategies and calculations, and constant imaginations of what a home, a neighborhood, and a public realm might look like. In fact, the meaning of home, neighborhood, and public realm may very well be something radically different from these concepts, either as theorized in the literature or in the practices of the global spaces, and thereby the public realm, are always in the making because they are not quite done, they're always being altered, expanded, and elaborated upon. Co-designing publics. The most potent aspect of the public realm lies in its capacity to co-design publics. Publics never simply exist, they are always created. Publics are created or co-designed by citizens themselves out of groups of people who are made and remade by the actions of other people. For example, when there is a common concern or desire that emerges out of a crisis such as urban inequality, lack of affordable housing, inadequate infrastructure, or the effects of a global pandemic, there's often a call to action, and groups of people are willing to act upon those concerns or desires, and a public is created. A public is summoned into being. An ongoing process of designing and redesigning democracy with the city as its site and its context. My work builds on this phenomena to better understand how informal urbanisms in the public realm can become catalysts for co-designing publics. As much as conventional urban design tends to be focused on the creation of spatial outcomes such as buildings, open spaces, and infrastructures, equally, or perhaps even more formidable, is design as a process of creative brainstorming and crafting radical imaginaries in the context of issue-based publics. Issues are rarely given, and if they are given, tend to be so in the broadest of terms, still requiring further inquiry to make them apparent and known. Discovery occurs through a process of inquiry, which can be characterized by directed research, analysis, reflection, and synthesis, which then produces a whole that is able to be made apparent and known. Design also aids as, as well as the ways in which action-oriented sensibilities of design reveal much through critical reflection on issues, analysis of sites of actions, and an ongoing understanding of larger contexts. Thus, critical design issues and problems are to be discovered rather than simply be given by a client. The nuts and bolts of co-designing publics are far from smooth. Processes of co-designing publics draw citizens into vital urban realms where they encounter each other and engage in collective and meaningful negotiations about what kind of city they desire. These encounters build a shared sense of common purpose and solidarity among citizens. But the encounters also make citizens aware of the substantive differences among them, and they're forced to confront and manage these differences together. There are various ways of dealing with such differences. Much more willing to see things work themselves out in the process of unfolding through our collective efforts and directed actions, subject to ongoing revision and revitalization, rather than following a set course towards some imagined end goal. Pragmatists, also in the strictly philosophical sense, advocate open-ended collaboration where what matters the most is ongoing conversations in which participants figure things out as they go along, a process that can yield new ways of thinking and new ways of doing. Such radically democratic approaches can be excruciating but ultimately liberating and share similarities with the iterative and reflective processes of design. Such intensive and collaborative open-endedness is one of the ultimate promises of co-designing publics through informal urbanisms in the public realm. Informal urbanisms generate new modes of politics through practices. These politics tend to be rooted in the spatial production of the public realm, especially in collective residential spaces and their attendant neighborhood spaces. In many cities, social movements and grassroots organizations have created new discourses of rights and put forward demands that are the basis of the rise of new citizenships, the formulation of new constitutions, the experimentation with new forms of local administration, and the approaches and the invention of new approaches to social policy, planning, law, and citizen participation. Thus, informal urbanisms are both processes and outcomes. In fact, processes are privileged over outcomes, not only because urban forms and spaces emerge out of specific types of processes in particular contexts to the benefit of some more than others, but also because the city is always in process as buildings, spaces, infrastructures age and are demolished, repaired, modified, and built anew in a series of never-ending activities. Publics via the public realm is radical democracy. Radical democracy is the process of exertion where a path towards social justice might be opened in place of utopia as a permanent means without end. Through this process, radical democracy is about emancipation, which can be, sorry about that. Through this process, radical democracy is about emancipation, which can be understood as an awakening or a rediscovery of power that is deeply rooted in processes of mobilization and transformation. And since the city belongs to everyone, we are in fact all in this process of emancipation together. Global South. I contextualize this discussion by paying particular attention to the cities of the Global South because place matters in shaping urban thinking and practice. There's an increasing interest in thinking and practicing from the cities of the Global South rather than just about them. Looking from the cities of global types of inquiry because of the particular nature of the urbanism. The cities of the Global South are mostly located geographically in the Southern Hemisphere in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The cities of the Global South also tend to be historically the oldest occupied cities, as well as currently the fastest growing cities in the world. These cities are also where one finds empirical conditions of precarity, in which large majorities of the population are politically, economically, and ecologically vulnerable. Looking from the cities of the global south then points to certain characteristics of urban practice in these contexts, such as fluidity, uncertainty, and speculative action. These prevalent characteristics challenge all the certainties that evidence based urban policy tends to take for granted, that systems will work as they should, that people will act predictably, and that the rules of the game are fair and stable. In this manner, the view from the cities of the global south this view is especially timely because, as we saw with both the COVID-19 global pandemic and its policy responses, they reveal the precarity of cities by exacerbating the class inequalities and structural racisms upon which many of them have been built, including deeply rooted legacies of colonialism. However, the cities of the global south are also filled with the types of plural and overlapping collectivities and density of interchanges that lend themselves to co-designing publics. Illuminating case studies. I'm going to illuminate some of these points through brief descriptions of case studies that are part of our international research and practice network in collaboration with our activist practitioner partners, whom I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. We are extremely fortunate to have a number of highly dedicated and accomplished activist practitioners from 6 different cities in the global south. Just to refresh your memory. Hasiru Dalla for Urban Studies in Jakarta, União Nacional por a Moradia Popular in Sao Paulo, Cambodian Center for Human Rights in Phnom Penh, Project 90 by 2030 in Cape Town, and Asociación Mejorando Vidas in Cali. I will briefly describe 3 of these examples as illuminating case studies. The Rujak Center for Urban Studies is based in Jakarta. Their main focus is on economic sustainabilities via issues such as housing, mobility, water and air pollution, and the informal economy. They always work together with communities and believe in the co-production of practice. One of the main issues the Rujak Center has been fighting is the forced eviction of low-income families in informal settlements. One of their key strategies is to better understand and work with people in kampungs, which are traditional villages or informal settlements within a city. They work at multiple scales of space simultaneously and provide technical assistance at the street and neighborhood scales, while simultaneously placing that work at the larger regional scale of infrastructure networks and bodies of water. Hasiru Dalla means green force in the regional Kannada language of South India. They work with waste pickers in the city of Bengaluru, who are those that pick up waste on the street, and with their labor, they sort, grade, and make it into a recyclable and tradable tradable commodity. The main objective of Hasiru Dalla is to provide space for these informal waste pickers within the formal waste management system by promoting appropriate, decentralized, and cost-effective solutions for solid waste management and decent livelihoods. One of the crucial ways they do this is through the creation of solid waste management centers in the neighborhoods, as you see in this image. These centers are run by the waste pickers themselves. Hasiru Dalla really invests the time behind his active stakeholders. Thus, the public realm is not only spatial, but also an ongoing process that opens up to broader groups of people. Waste pickers and their work are often invisible and unacknowledged. Hasirudallah creates change not only through policy but also through public spaces. One illustration of this is a recently completed mural on the walls of one of Bengaluru's prominent and iconic buildings and consists of portraits of one sanitation worker and one waste picker. Project 90 by 2030 is a grassroots organization that wants to reduce carbon emissions by 90% by the year 2030. They work with stakeholders and decision makers, and they try to identify policies and actions that support climate justice. They have a specific focus on developing environmental leadership in the youth and increasing people's ability to engage government through public participation to address climate change, energy poverty, and social injustices in the community. This is an image of one of their community leaders at a political debate where communities had the opportunity to ask the political candidates what their views were on energy access and climate change. This event was organized by 5 different civil society organizations with 7 political party leaders in attendance. And these leaders were targeted by community leaders to answer some serious questions. Community partnerships such as these allow for peer-to-peer learning, to build campaigns, to take on public participation, and to write and engage with local government on access to energy within the communities. One of the strongest aspects of Project 90 by 2030 is youth mobilization. There are frequent events where everything is organized by youth, including all the background work, and there's also a team behind the scenes of older people just to support and to guide as needed. They believe that youth are real citizens who are active in addressing a lot of the issues and inequalities that they see. So co-design for them also means concluding thoughts. I now conclude my talk with some reflections on the ideas and case studies we have investigated in this international research and practice network. The real goal of producing and reproducing the public realm is to enable the ongoing co-design of publics, such that we move rapidly towards a far more just, equitable, and radically democratic city for all, especially for those who are marginalized. Co-design, with its direct engagement in the spatial and non-spatial aspects of urbanism and its inherent creative thinking and interdisciplinary approaches, is ideal for discovering and articulating radical imaginaries for the public realm. Scholars from different perspectives agree that hope lies in these ongoing processes and informal aspects of the public realm. Hope for designing the truly equitable future for cities might thus very well reside in this messy, multifaceted, and ultimately political and reproduction of cities. In fact, perhaps more so than in professionalized urbanism. We can see already glimpses of a powerful new urban society in the midst of precarity. While they may seem fleeting and fragmented, they are truly significant urban practices of social autogestion and spatial appropriation undertaken by real inhabitants. As we have done in our network, one can closely examine these practices in their specific contexts, compare them across contexts, exchange experiences and ideas, and extrapolate further to generate common knowledge and new understandings. We can use this new knowledge as a lens to help us see better and further, because such practices can be difficult to acknowledge in the current spatial political economies of corporatism and neoliberalism. Moreover, we can, together as tools to move towards a new horizon of radical democracy. Such examples abound. We have to learn collaboratively to see them, to understand them, to nurture them, and ultimately we have to be them. Thank you. If you're curious about the book, it is available for purchase online in bookstores around the world. By the way, you might be interested to know that we use part of our grant funding to subsidize the cost of the book and make it more affordable. In addition, there are some websites on the screen with other resources if you're interested. I will now be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aseem, for your lecture. I hope my connection is better now because I adjusted some of my problems on my end. So I hope there will not be additional problems. So before we wait for some of the questions from the audience, I would like to start this conversation with you, because I think it is very interesting the way you relate publics with democracy. And in fact, well, I'm now considering the European level. At the European level, now there are big concerns regarding democracy and how we can restore trust and establish new opportunities for citizens also to be engaged in the political and public life. So in your lecture, you referred to governance, which is also a key element for public space. Who is in charge and who can really, because you talk about power also, who could really exercise power through public space. I think those concepts are very, very important because sometimes we address public space only from a design perspective, but instead public space is very much related to public concerns and public realm, or what you call informal urbanism. So can you tell us a bit more regarding these aspects? How do you, also because you presented the work of some organizations from the Global South that are maybe giving an idea of this power you are referring to?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a really good question. At the extreme scale, as you know, a lot of revolutions, even now, are started and evolved in public spaces in cities where people don't wait for permission to express themselves politically, collaboratively. Because the city does belong to them. I know there are all kinds of rules and regulations. So that's the one end that has led to amazing, democratic change. We know last few decades where less than democratic authoritarian regimes have been overthrown in space, the emergence of new leaders. But I'd also like to talk about the everyday democracy, because as we know, very often people focus on the formal aspects of democracy at the city level, the mayor, the council, etc. But it's also the everyday democracy about how people's needs are expressed. But that's one thing. The other thing is what very often what might be missing in the debates about democracies, the ongoing discussions and debates. Everyone doesn't agree. For example, I happened to be in New York City, living and working in New York City when Occupy Wall Street happened. And as you know, Occupy Wall Street was inspired by the Global South, by first of all the Arab Spring, and then by Spain, the Indignados in Madrid. So it was very interesting. It was very much an international sort of. And what I found was just amazing. I thought it's one of the most amazing things had to happen to public space in the US in decades. And the way they were making decisions, like I said, it's actually quite painful. You have to be very patient. They were making decisions collectively and they didn't have leaders. They had amazing things they were doing. And I'll give you one quick example before we move to the next question. Was one of the things that was happening, the way the New York City government, talk about governance, was trying to get rid of the people occupying that public space in Manhattan, was the police started sending homeless people to them. Oh, if you want food, it's there. So as a collective, as a group, they decided, the protesters and occupiers, we will feed them. So they set up a kitchen. They had people riding bikes, generating electricity for all the appliances, and they started feeding the homeless. It was just astounding. I spent a day there, and I thought it was just amazing how they took what was a design of it was in Wall Street, so kind of a corporate public space, and made it truly democratic on an everyday basis. So there's a great potential for that in many different parts of the world. So just last to end that, so there's the everyday democracy of people gathering, expressing, discussing, debating, and then influencing the more formal governance structure of cities. I think the two are intertwined. And many examples.
So maybe we could talk about everyday politics of public space.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, there are many. I've spent maybe more time in the U.S. before I came to the U.K., and I see that as you know, actually this happens all over the world, but in the U.S. particularly, there are always signs at the entrance to a public space saying what's not allowed. No skateboarding, no music, no that. And contrast that with, I was in Toronto once, and I was walking along, and there was a sign which said, "Welcome to this public space. You're welcome to stay here. You can have your lunch." I'd never seen a positive sign saying, "This is your space. Welcome, use it." Things like that. And I think that attitude shift is really important, that public space belongs to everybody, and how they use it, how they occupy it, how they make it their own. Which is part of this larger discourse I talk about in terms of should belong to everyone. But as we know, there's a lot of exclusion and oppression that happens. So I think the city can be a very big part of this. Democracy is a work in progress, as we know. It's not perfect, it's flawed, but it's the best system of governance we know. And the city can be a really fundamental part of this what I call an ongoing project of democracy. As you were saying, there's a lot of concerns now, but how do we rebuild democracy? How do we make, that's why I use the word radical, because very often conventional thinking about democracy is, it's this kind of neoliberal, representative governance structures. But I think part of your question is also questioning what is democracy, how does it work, how can we make it more effective. So cities and public space and public realm can and do play a major role in that ongoing project.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and we should talk more about this, actually, more opportunities to be in such a interesting conversation. Now, I see a question from the audience.
Thank you for a great lecture. I wonder how we might leverage informal codes and public realm to advance spatial justice in underserved neighborhoods and cities of the global north as well. Arvind, thank you for a great question. I completely agree. One of the reasons we as a team decided to focus on the global south is cities of the global south tend to face more challenges. I mentioned that a large majority of populations in the global south live in constant precarity, and yet they're able to achieve so much. And of course, I very briefly only touched on some of the case studies, but we had the people who are responsible for these case studies in our network. We had fantastic workshops and conversations, and there were lessons there for each other. It was very interesting. We had people from Colombia and Brazil and India and South Africa and Cambodia, all over the world, and they were learning from each other. but our interest was also what can we learn from this project. Simple going into too much is how do you learn to do more with less? It's not always about resources, it's not always about having lots of money. How do you leverage, of course, people more than anything else to make an impact? And I think part of the answer, as you probably know already, is to be political, to say this is a political process. It's not just design. And in fact, some of the people in our network have gone to jail for that, for resisting and speaking up. I mean, great courage. So that's another reason I think we have to look beyond conventional urban design if you want to make these kinds of changes. The second thing I would say is how, in terms of informal co-design, is how they build alliances, and sometimes temporary alliances with other organizations, other groups. You don't have to agree 100% with each other, but if you have a common cause about the public realm and spatial justice, how do you build? I think I showed you the example from South Africa, where they had these community forums having political leaders, and especially during elections when they pay attention to these things, come and answer questions about issues that matter to the community. So one is kind of embracing the fact this is a political process. That's why I call it spatial political economy. Second is building alliances. And the third is what are we really trying to do? What's the bigger picture? And what we found in these very different groups I present in the 6 cities, they may not use that term, but what I found was they were all aiming for radical democracy, whether it's through housing, through energy, through public space, etc. So I think there are several lessons that can be adapted. I would say it's definitely not a copying exercise, but learned from and adapted to cities of the global north as well. Uh, Sorry, I think Louisa is having problems with her internet connection. Let me see if I can see any other comments. We'll wait a minute or two to see if hopefully Louisa can get her internet connection back. If anybody has in the chat, I'll try to answer directly. Yeah, let's wait a minute or two.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think we are running out of time, Lisa.
Yes, and I'm very sorry because of all these problems with the internet connection. But as I said, Aseem, your lecture is extremely interesting because it gives a completely new and very interesting perspective on how to understand public space from a different point of view, which is, of course, related to everyday life, everyday politics, and everyday engagement in public space. I think that especially from the global north, where democracy is facing a deep crisis, we should restart thinking public space with this perspective that you actually presented today. So, in fact, I see, yes, another nice comment.
Thank you for that comment. I
Well,
appreciate that. Yes.
despite the internet difficulties, I guess there was an audience was engaged with your presentation. Thank you again, Aseem, and I hope we can.
I don't know if you can hear me, Louisa, but thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, sorry about these internet connection
Designing
problems.
public.
Yes, I can hear you now.
So, to say thank you again to Aseem and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. It was my pleasure. Bye.
Thank you, Aseem. Bye.
Bye.
So the next